The New York City pavement was hot enough to melt steel, but thankfully, the fire hydrants were blasting cool, refreshing water, giving the neighborhood children a method of cooling down. In the distance, an ice cream truck could be heard, prompting the children to shout with excitement. The fire hydrant was quickly forgotten as parents dug out their wallets and pocket change, but before any of them could dish out a single cent, the Milk Boys were making their way into the neighborhood. "Denis!" shouted a girl with pigtails, causing the parents and other children to look up. The Milk Boys were 6 trans-mascs who rode around the city on Super 73s. Having grown up in Queens, the 6 men were a tight-knit bunch who all shared a love for bikes, storytelling, art, comic books, and serving their community. Whether it was checking up on the elderly folks, walking the local children to and from the bus stop, or providing free babysitting services to single parents, the Milk Boys were a staple within their community. "All right, everyone, single file line. We gotta be quick. Hurry, hurry," Denis shouted. Travis, Denis's boyfriend and best friend since grade school, pulled out his wallet. "When are you all going to let us pay you?" Mr. Jones, one of the parents, shouted, throwing his hands in the air. The Milk Boys were always buying treats for the kids in the neighborhood. If they were at the corner store, they would load their backpacks with sugary snacks and dish them out as they rode through the neighborhood. If they were at the supermarket, they brought fruit and other healthy snacks and stopped by to drop them off. The parents and other adults in the neighborhood saw the Milk Boys as saints, but the truth was, they simply had plenty to spare. Tony, Travis's father, did well for himself. Tony and his best friend, Roy, were in the business of building and selling businesses. The men did well for themselves, and Tony was never shy about sharing his wealth. But before Tony began showering Travis and his older brother, Tyler, with gifts, he made sure they knew the importance of hard work. Travis and Tyler were privileged, and Tony and Sandra, Tyler and Travis's mom, made sure that their boys knew that. In high school, Sandra and Tony required that the boys get jobs. While Tony and Sandra loved to spoil their boys, they needed them to understand how privileged they were. Sandra and Tony always told Tyler and Travis that they weren't rich. They were, but Tony and Sandra were never stingy with their money. Tony and Sandra taught their sons that providing value was how they got money. So instead of, "Can I have some money?" the boys learned to ask, "How can we make money?" Friends and family thought this was cruel of Tony and Sandra, but that simple change in words completely changed the way Tyler and Travis thought about money. In their minds, the brothers were surrounded by money. They just needed to figure out how to convince people to give it to them. But being surrounded by money was a privilege, and the brothers were very much aware of that. So much so that after meeting Denis, Kenny, Rex, and Josh and coming out to one another, the 6 men put their heads together to figure out how to make enough money to pay for their top surgeries. With the help of Tony, the Milk Boys started a publishing house and began writing comic book series. After high school, Rex and Josh got into video editing, and the pair came up with the idea to make animations of the comics that they wrote. Kenny and Denis, being the sketch artists of the bunch, took some animation classes alongside Josh and Rex. All the Milk Boys were involved in coming up with the story ideas, but it was Tyler and Travis who wrote the stories, while Kenny and Denis drew and edited the stories, while Josh and Rex turned the comic books into animated shorts, films, and shows. The Milk Boys did well for themselves. Between comic book sales, YouTube ad revenue, and the money they got from their Buy Me a Coffee page, the Milk Boys made plenty of money. Of course, much of what they made was reinvested into the company, and after 2 years, with the help of Tony, Roy, and Josh's parents, the Milk Boys were able to get a house, not too far from Tony and Sandra's. After they brought a home, the Milk Boys went into overdrive, and the boys began making more money than ever. As the money rolled in, the guys began thinking about their community. Without their neighbors, random people at the corner stores, and the kids that hung out at the library, the Milk Boys would have never gotten as big as they did, as fast as they did. And so, to show their appreciation, the Milk Boys began serving their community, helping in any way that they could think of. Don't worry about it, Mr. Jones. We get all that we need from the satisfaction of being of service," Kenny said, waving a dismissive hand. After making sure that everyone had their ice cream, the Milk Boys sat with the children, talking and eating their ice cream. The truth was the Milk Boys got a lot of inspiration from hanging out with the kids. Their imaginations were massive, and they had a lot of good ideas. Sure, they weren't fully fleshed out, but among the 6 of them, the Milk Boys could turn anything into a comic book series. So as the day began to fade into the evening, parents began rounding up their children to take them inside. But before they left, each child just had to get a hug from each of the Milk Boys. After the final little girl ran off, the boys hopped onto their bikes and began making their way home.